Hi, I'm Holt, the gardener here at Tuckahoe Plantation, and I wanted to talk to you today about rose pruning 101. So the techniques that we're going to go over today should apply to most popular and standard types of rose bushes and shrubs. It doesn't really apply to climbing roses. You treat those a little bit differently, and this is not the technique that you would use for hybrid teas. Hybrid teas are a little bit pickier about when and how they are pruned. But most common garden roses, this technique works beautifully for. So the first thing you need to do when approaching your rose, you need to know that you have the right gear. So gloves are a must, and pruners, which is what you'll be doing the main amount of cutting with, but it's also good to have loppers with you. Some of the older, woodier branches get to be a lot thicker than what your standard pruners can handle. Hi, buddy. If you don't have loppers, you can use a saw. I tend to shy away from using saws with rose bushes because the teeth extend a lot farther than just that one branch that you're trying to cut, so you've got some potential for damaging other branches, which you want to avoid at all costs. So if you're really careful, go ahead and use a saw, but it's a lot easier and more efficient with your time if you have some loppers to go with. So once you've got all your gear together, make sure your tools are sharp. You want to have nice clean cuts, and a sharp clean blade is what you need for that. After you got all that together, first step is to just look at your rose bush, see the overall shape of it, and imagine what you want it to be. So we prune for several reasons. We prune to shape the plant. We prune for the plant's health, cutting off old, tired branches or damaged or diseased branches so that the plant can refocus on new growth. And we prune to ensure air and light gets to all the areas of the plant that are growing. So roses crave air and light above all things. So you see at the end of the season the plant gets a little bit chaotic. There are crossing limbs. So what we're going to do first off, just to get a clearer view of the plant, is take it down to about hip height. Eventually I take all of the roses to about knee height, and then by the end of the season they'll grow up to this high or even higher. So just so we can see a little bit more clearly what we're doing, I'm going to make some cuts just to take it down a little bit to reduce the chaos so we can clearer see what we're looking at. And so you can also see what I'm doing here. So this one didn't have any huge tall canes coming up out of it, so so this kind of takes it to around hip height. So the next thing then that we want to focus on is, if you look at the plant from above, you can see that there are a lot of limbs that are growing in towards the center of the plant. That causes crossing limbs, of course, and the more they cross, the more they interfere with each other. The limbs can damage each other, and also they kind of choke each other out. So what we're going to do right now is just cut out any limbs, any branches that are growing in towards the center of the plant. The goal right here is to just open up the center of the plant so air can get in. Alright, so we're a little bit more spacious. We can see into the center of the plant, which is a big deal. So we're also going to take out, at this point, we're going to focus on branches that are tired. So although your rose is a perennial, each individual branch of your rose does have a lifespan. And these older, woodier branches, they're getting up in years, and they're much less vigorous than these new canes like this right here would be. So whenever you've got the option to, I would prune out these older branches that are kind of wearing thin. You see there is still growth on them, there's life coming out of them, but it's nowhere near as vigorous as the growth that's coming off of these green ones here. So for these, we're going to use our loppers, and it's a general good practice to prune from the bottom of the plant. So we're going to get down here towards the base, and we're going to just cut that whole woody piece off. This one as well.
Mama.
Yes, darling. Alright, so this clears things up a little bit so we can see a little bit better. So you can see a couple of these branches are a little bit wimpier, so after you get all of the older branches, anything that looks damaged, anything that looks like it might be diseased, just prune out the wimpier looking ones, the ones that aren't quite as vigorous as the rest. This guy's growing in towards the center, so we'll just get rid of him even though he's healthy. And this guy can go. He's not quite as strong as the rest. So in a situation like what we have right here, both these branches are healthy. Both of them are kind of leaning towards the outside of the plant, but they're crossing, so we can't have both of them stay there. They're both trying to take up the same space, and they will end up choking each other out once new growth comes off of them the next season. So we're just going to pick our favorite. This one's a little bit thicker, and I kind of like the direction it's heading better, so we're just going to get rid of its neighbor right there. And same deal with these. These aren't touching, but they're still crossing, so any branches that come off of either of them will interfere with each other. So we're going to take this guy off. Alright, same deal with this. These guys are crossing, so I'm just going to pick my favorite here, which will be the one in the middle. Alright, so at this point, I'm comfortable going ahead and taking it down to the height, the level that it's going to end up being at. So when you're making your final cuts on the plant, you need to look for a node or an eye or a bud, people call them different things, that is facing the outside of the plant. Right here, this is your node. That encourages the branches that come off of the cane to grow out rather than into the plant. That's what we're trying to avoid. So the cuts that you need to make will be at a 45-degree angle, sloping away from that node. That way any rainwater that hits the plant will slide right off, because we don't want rain pooling at any of our branches, or really anywhere on a rose plant. So all of our cuts will follow that same theme. We've got an outward facing node right there. 45-degree angle, about a 1/4 inch above that node is what you're aiming for. So right there. So this is a pretty vigorously pruned rose bush, and I tend to do dramatic pruning like this because they bounce right back, and if I don't, they'll be taller than my head by the end of the season. You don't have to prune down this harshly. You can do a more moderate pruning. I tend to leave somewhere in between 3 and 5 or even 6 canes coming up off of the base of the plant. Some people leave as many as 12. The main goal is to make sure that they are relatively evenly spaced so that each cane has enough air and light, and so that they aren't going to interfere with each other in the next year's growth. Last little things that I'm going to do are prune out some of these dead little stumps here. Not quite dead, but dying. They're not going to give us really good strong growth, so we want to just discourage any growth coming off to interfere with what we've got going. Alright, and as you look around this bed here, these are other examples of what a pruned rose bush might look like. Again, if it's your first time pruning, if you don't want to go this dramatic with it, by all means you don't have to, but really it's better for your rose bush for you to prune and make a few mistakes than not prune at all. Roses are they're much more resilient than a lot of people give them credit for. They bounce back after a hard pruning like this really beautifully.